Hi everyone, this is Dr. Fab Mancini, and thank you once again for joining us for the FCA Empowerment Half-Hour Webinar Series. Now, you may be asking yourself, why is the FCA putting together this weekly webinar series? Well, it's because we know that you need to get some information on a constant basis, that you're trying to make decisions with this ever-changing healthcare system, and also to be able to bring you some of the best speakers in the chiropractic profession to help you empower you, to help you, give you some great suggestions on how you can better serve your patients, how you can build your practices, or better even manage your practices better. And today is one of my favorite speakers in the chiropractic profession, Lori Allen. And let me tell you something, when I first met Lori, I still remember I was in New York City and I sat in her course and I just couldn't believe it, because in all the years that I ran Parker seminars and all the years that I've known some of the top trainers in the profession, I haven't met her. And friends of mine had hired her to do a program to their members, and I just sat there and I was in awe. You know, because you're going to get to experience someone that is extremely certain about how to help you manage your practice effectively. And not only that, how to manage your patients effectively. So, Lori, thank you so much for joining us in this FCA webinar series.
Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, one of the things, Lori, that I wanted to start with is that I find many times that there's probably a lot of people that have heard about you, maybe sat in your class and been your students or even possible clients, but perhaps you can share with us a little bit about what were you doing before you got into chiropractic? How did you get involved into chiropractic? And because really, I think that's some of the most fascinating stories come from how we all got into this great profession of ours.
I've been in this, Dr. Mancini, for over 20 years. I was in the medical field before, actually on the medical staffing side of it, and started to run a practice, actually based in Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. And it was an integrated practice of chiropractic and other services. And I went into the practice, became director of community outreach and development, and really did some amazing things with the practice. Loved the industry. And from there, it's been nonstop. I think it's where I was meant to be. I love it. I have a passion for it. I have a great success rate and just really, really enjoy helping the doctors get the best outcome for their patients, helping the staff be the best they can be. So it's been a great 20 plus years, and I look forward to continuing to do it.
Well, you know, one of the things that I found fascinating about you is the fact that you not only train the doctor, but you also train their CAs. And you have a belief system that when the whole office understands each other's roles, when everybody's working towards one common goal, we can achieve more success than otherwise. So tell me a little bit about perhaps your first client in chiropractic. What are some of the challenges that you were seeing in those days? And then let's take it into a journey as to what are some of the issues that you see most of your clients facing right now, today in 2016.
Believe it or not, I see some of the same challenges today that I did then. Obviously, you know, healthcare has evolved and the market is different. But when you're looking at business systems within these practices, we're still experiencing, you know, some of the same challenges. One thing I really do is I work with the doctors to make sure that they're running it like a business, that they have to realize they have to be hands-on. You know, I think it's a myth that you can own a practice and not be there. So I work with them for them to understand the 6 components of a good business practice. I also work with them to understand how important their staff is. You cannot have a good practice without a good staff. And to make sure that you have the right personality, the right skill sets, to make sure that that individual is respected, that individual is paid a good salary, and that individual is trained. So the way I get success out of practices, which is the same way I did years ago and how I continue on this journey, is I work with the practice as a whole, starting with the owner, starting with the doctors. You know, Dr. Fab, I call it a relay race. You got to pass the baton. Pass the baton, pass the baton, pass the baton. The one who drops the baton loses the race. What we want to do is we want everybody winning, especially the patients. So if we're looking at a practice that has a provider, a case manager, a front desk, if you have different providers, everybody has to be speaking the same language. So if we take a look at the 3 main components that I work with, number 1 is standardization of systems. And that's a challenge because you have to have the standards in. But they also have to understand when they have the standard, why somebody is doing it so they get the reason, not just doing a task, and how to get the outcome. Communication is so key. being able to proactively guide and lead the patients. I see too many practices asking the patient what they want instead of being the expert to go ahead and guide the patient as to what they need. So I work really hard to teach them how to communicate proactively, show them how to be on the same page, communicating as a team, and then how to do really good patient education. So those two are a problem that I've been seeing for years, and I continue to try to help. And then the third thing is making sure that we have accountability. So we have the systems, we have the communication, the accountability has to be in. And I think if I'm doing business another 30 years, we'll still be working with the importance of the doctors being involved, everybody looking at it as a business, and making sure that the standards are in, communication is strong, and accountability is there.
Well, you know, it's interesting because many times we as chiropractors, when we get into chiropractic school, it's all about the healthcare of the patient. It's the excitement and passion for adjusting our patients. And many times I've said, you got to handle the business of chiropractic because the business is what sustains our passion for chiropractic. And many times I've seen a lot of training, and, you know, at Parker Seminars, I've trained, you know, chiropractic assistants and offices for over 65 years. And one of the things that I see consistently is exactly what you said, is that sometimes the attitudes of this is not my responsibility, I wish I didn't have to do that, instead of just welcoming and learning that that's part of the process. If I want to be a successful chiropractor, I have to have great systems in place, and I have to hire great people and train them the best way possible. So what are some of the challenges that you see, what the resistance of why chiropractors don't like to invest in training? Because it doesn't make any sense. Like any business, you have to train your people to be able to manage their skills and manage their duties on a daily basis. But what do you find as far as when you're getting a new client, or perhaps clients that you have seen again and again, but they just don't commit and they keep, you know, going through the same things again and again, and frustrated and blaming everybody else for it instead of taking responsibility?
And that's exactly what we see. We see a lot of finger pointing and not taking responsibility. One thing that I do not like, and I think you would agree, we see it in our industry, is turnover. You know, turnover is not good. Turnover is not good for the practice. It's not good for the patient. It's costly. And if we can just take a look at how important it is to invest in the position. You know, I do a lot of teaching, you know, from the front office, the front desk, the effective, the profitable front desk, because it's not a receptionist. It's an important part. You know, they're the gatekeeper of the office, and training takes time. And I think a lot of chiropractors and doctors struggle on how do I find the time to train while I'm teaching, and so they don't go about it in the right way. You can't give somebody something and say, read this, and then expect them to understand it and get upset if it's not being done the right way. So there has to be a really good training system. And like I had said before, you can't just tell somebody what you want them to do. This is what I want you to do. This is how I want you to do it. This is why I want you to do it. If we can train somebody as to why they're doing it, then they're going to understand the why behind it. They're not going to do it as a task. They're going to get a purpose out of it. So I've done a lot of work and putting together some really great online training, so they can actually be trained virtually every day. So I have every office look at how are you training your people? What do we have in place to make sure? And training can't be done one time. You know, when you look at people who are masters and professionals and professional athletes, they don't practice one time. You know, they practice every single day. So the doctor, the owner, has to understand that they're running a business. We have to invest in our staff. I believe without staff, you don't really have an organization. Investing in that right staff, but then training that right staff and continuing to train them truthfully, so we can get that patient outcome. That's what I look at it for. Get the patient outcome. With the patient outcome, there the practice wins.
Well, you know, Lori, one of the things that you said it really well is that the fact that we need to really do training consistently. And when I saw some of your virtual educational systems, I was just so impressed because the way you package, the way you organized it is very practical to implement. And I think that that's what in the past I've seen, you know, many systems comes and go, but unfortunately they're just not very practical to implement. So they just sit on a shelf and nobody ever uses it. Now, another thing that I observe is that a lot of times the doctor and the CA are not in the same page, meaning that the expectations of the CA from the doctor, they think is one thing, and the expectations from the doctor to the CA is another one. So give me a little bit of an understanding of when you go into an office, you know, what are some of the differences that you see from the perspective of how does a doctor view a CA role, and how does CA view the doctor role, and how do they sometimes don't match? Because I find that that's one of their biggest frustrations.
I see it every day, and what we have to look at is everybody needs to be trained on everything. And I do a lot of teaching, as you know, throughout the country at a lot of state associations and other organizations. And what I see is the doctor sends his staff into my room and then expects it to be magic. The best success I see is when the doctor is there with them. So when I go to an office, no matter what I'm training on, I train the entire staff. Because I think clinical needs to understand administration, administration needs to understand clinical. That's how you develop that team. And that strong team is what is needed. As we said earlier, we can't be islands by ourselves. So I always tell the doctor, please come into the class. Please sit and learn and understand what your staff is learning. I actually will present the same class in 2 different ways. I will present it to the CAs, and I encourage everybody to be part of that class. But I'll also present that class to an owner, to a doctor, so they can see the importance of running their practice in that manner. So everybody has to be on the same page. The communication has to be there, and it can't be, you go learn this because I'm supposed to do this. Because if we're doing that, we're not going to get the outcome we're looking for.
Well, so tell me a little bit about, so when somebody becomes your client, what are some of the things that you do in order to assess where I'm at? And then how do we begin to work together in order for you to not only help me as a chiropractor, but also help me support my staff so we can then move this practice forward together as a team?
One thing I will not do is I will not start to work with an office as a client until I go see it. I need to touch it. I need to feel it. So I will actually go in and assess the practice. The assessment's a pretty simple practice because when I walk into a practice, it's amazing what you can see and hear. So I will assess that practice from listening to what they're saying. I will watch the flow and looking at what they're doing. I will meet and interview each employee. I will meet and interview owners, providers, etc., and then actually put my pulse on what is right, what is wrong, and start to work with that practice on an individual basis. You know some of my clients, and I work very closely with them. I know them very well. So I am very passionate about knowing them, getting in, putting my finger on it and finding the pulse and doing a true assessment as to what's being done correctly so we can continue it. But more importantly, the small tweaks and things that are needed so that we can run it, from a clinical competence perspective, but also from a business perspective.
So Lori, from the perspective, we're seeing that chiropractic, and it's interesting because, as you know, we have some chiropractors that are having the best years of their lives as far as chiropractic care is concerned, and we have others that are really struggling and they're really seeing some of the worst days of their lives.
Great.
Profession. So in your opinion, being 20 years in our industry, helping support thousands of chiropractic offices, what do you think are some of the top 2 or 3 behaviors of the successful chiropractors? What are some of the things that you see that they have in common, the common denominators that, whether it's mindset or behaviors, that you think has led them to really see the best days in chiropractic today in 2016?
Well, I think you have to think outside the box today. As you and I both know, industry continues to change. So you have to think outside the box, and you have to go with the trends of today. And I think we are looking at, things sometimes going a little bit more cash. Insurance is changing. So we can't do today what we did yesterday. It's always looking forward and understanding what's the market of today and going with those trends. But it's also having a positive attitude and still loving what you do. I believe if you're passionate and you have purpose, you're always going to win. And sometimes it's not easy and it's not hard, but you have to keep that positive attitude. You have to look at the purpose and the passion, and then you have to, and today, more important than ever, run that business model. So if we can, think outside the box, keep up with the changes, make sure that you stay on purpose, and be willing to put a business model in. I know because I work with most of them, you're still going to be successful, and you can still have your best year ever.
Lori, a lot of times we talk about our practice and management of our practice from a doctor's perspective, sometimes from a CA perspective. But I want to go a little bit out of the box now and really talk about the patient's perspective. I've seen you work with your clients. I've seen how you establish an environment that's very easy and conducive for the patient to say yes to care rather than to say no to care, which is what a lot of doctors are struggling with. So from a patient perspective, what is it that you look for to establish in that office so that patient not only can be magnetized and be attracted into that environment, but most importantly, stay in that environment, refer into that environment, and pay into that environment, which is what we all want from our patients.
First thing that needs to be done is a culture of customer service must be created. And I say customer service culture because there's a lot of people out there doing what you do. But we have to make sure, yes, service can be copied, price can be copied, but I don't think anything can ever duplicate that good customer service culture. So I make sure it starts on the phone. It's inviting. I make sure that the office stands out. It's meticulous, and it's a place where somebody wants to be. So number one is let's create that culture, a culture and an experience that's different than where else they would go. But then let's also look at how we're going to communicate to that patient. And we have to guide and lead the patient based on need. We have to be certain and confident that what you have to offer to them is important so that you can show them the value and benefit. And those are the two key words, value and benefit. If you can show patient value and benefit, I do believe they will follow your lead, and I know that they will pay. I do not think that money is always the objective. I think money is sometimes the excuse because they're not seeing value and benefit. So I had said about system and communication, let's jump to the clinical side. There should be a clear system on how that education is done, how that report is done, and agreement from the patient that they see value and benefit. When patient sees value and benefit, then we can jump into the systems of scheduling and rescheduling to keep them on. But what we're looking for is for a good compliant patient to complete the treatment plan with a clinical outcome, stay in the practice as maintenance, and refer to the practice. That takes some practice, that takes some work, and I work very hard with my doctors, not just staff, in training them how to guide and lead, how to be proactive, how to show value and benefit to get those two outcomes.
Well, Lori, also one of the things that we've seen over the years is that most of us in chiropractic, especially in today's time, I don't know if you know that over, let's say 15 years ago, the average age in chiropractic school was somewhere in the 30s, mid 30s. And now it's actually in the mid 20s. And they're coming right out of college into chiropractic office. Many of them have not worked before. Many of them have never owned a business. But here you are being pushed to open a chiropractic office or even run your office out of somebody else's office, but it's still managing a business. And then even it gets worse. You have to hire people. So tell me a little bit about maybe some tips on how to look for great CAs. What are some of the things that you have seen that have helped chiropractors attract the proper CAs? Because I notice a lot of times they go for friends or family members, and sometimes, that's just not a good recipe for success. So what are some of the things that if I'm just getting into practice or I'm having a lot of turnover problems in my office right now, what are some things that you can tell me that can help me stop that right now and maybe set myself up for more success when it comes to attracting excellent CAs?
I advise all my clients to always recruit. Always recruit and always be looking for good people. The other thing is you cannot change somebody. So if somebody presents one way in an interview, that's who's coming to work. We can't hire out of desperation and expect to get something different when they come to work. One thing that I do for my clients is I provide them with a list of phone questions to ask, as well as some very good questions to ask to be able to really engage and get that employee to open up. Do not just do one interview. Once you've narrowed it down, bring them in for a working interview. See how they work with your team. See how they fit within your environment. Make sure that you're doing reference checking and background checking so that we really know who we're bringing in to the establishment, but we can't do it quickly. So I see two things. Some people hold on too long because they're for fear and they have the wrong person working there. And some people hire too fast. You have to take time in the process, and you have to make sure that you are always recruiting. This is something that I help all my clients with. I'll help them write the ad to make sure that the ad is written properly. I help them place the ad to make sure that we're getting a quality. So there's not one answer here, but there's many, many facets to making sure that we are hiring that right person. And it's the key to the success of the organization.
Now, let's talk a little bit also about one of your signature trainings, which is the front desk.
Yes.
And you mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I want to bring a little bit of awareness to it because I realized that many times that's the position that we value least in an office.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we just want to put anybody in there to pick up the phone and answer the phone or just greet the patients instead of really looking at it from the way that you teach it, which is so much more different than anything else. And it becomes one of the most valued members within that team. So tell me a little bit about what got you to understand the role of the front desk, and also why is it that you put so much emphasis in making sure that front desk person is the best one trained when it comes to the management of that practice?
Well, if you look at the title, efficient, effective, and profitable, I don't know how to run an organization without those components. And if you look at that position, when I start teaching that class, I let them all know you're not a receptionist. You are a very, very important part of your practice, and they are. So I said earlier about customer service. They're the first voice of the practice. They're the first impression of the practice. Scheduling. You want to increase volume? You want to have a good flow? Scheduling has to be done properly. They handle scheduling. You want to keep your retention high? They handle rescheduling. You want to make sure your over-the-counter collections and your revenue is there. We've already said cash is more prominent today. They handle that. But they're also making sure that the flow is going and the organization is going. And so if you're looking at your practices, yes, treatment's important, but if we don't have them through the door, we don't have them schedule, reschedule, managing flow, doing verifications, putting in demographics, and honestly, you know, and I know I teach that class for 2 full days. That's how important I think it is. They are the face of the office, and they basically, you know, are the nerve root of the practice. So I encourage all of my clients, and I'm encouraging everybody who's watching this to really respect that position, value that position, pay that position, and, you know, retain that position because it's key. And where I see practices go up and down is when that position turns over. I would love to see this industry, and it's something, as you know, I'm working really hard with different organizations to make that position stable and not look at that as a high turnover position, but really get some good people there and train them properly. It makes all the difference in the world in what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and you know, I can understand that properly. And you know, one of the things that I also hear, and recently I was at an FCA convention, and they asked me to actually do a lecture for the students, I mean for the CAs. Mm-hmm. And I have prepared a presentation that I've done for CH, which is called The 10 Most Common Mistakes in Practice and How to Fix Them. And it was just from a compilation of over 60 years of data that we've collected at Parker seminars as to what are those some common mistakes and how to easily fix them. But instead what I did is that I just sat down and just said, let's just have a conversation. There were about 75 CAs there. And we just had a conversation, and I was asking them. And what I noticed is that many of them mentioned that they were going from office to office because they didn't feel comfortable, or that the doctor truly believed in their services, in their value, that the CA felt like they were being more of an advocate for chiropractic than the chiropractor that went to school for over 8 years and has sacrificed so many things to get there and gone into debt to go there, and they still don't. And I still remember, Lori, as a young man starting my practice, how I wasn't valuing chiropractic because I was just giving it away. And if patients didn't pay, I was like, okay, don't worry. And my CA is like, no, I mean, you went thousands of dollars in debt. Don't you value until you value your profession? No one else will value it. So what are some of the comments that you have gotten in the past from some of the CAs that you trained in of the reason why they didn't stay with that doctor, or maybe perhaps some of the disappointments on the current doctor that they're working with?
When you talk about not valuing, I think too many times the doctor thinks that I'm supposed to do the exam and do the treatment, and the front's going to do all the rest. And I see this every day where a doctor will prescribe a treatment plan 3 days a week or 2 days a week. Then they go to the front desk and they want to barter. That should not be. And when I teach the CA class, I say, if that's happening in your class, have your doctor come and see me, because the value is not being communicated. Because if that doctor was really communicating that and gaining agreement, then the front desk should not be a negotiation place. So I work really hard to make sure that the front doesn't think that that's their job. I believe that that's the doctor's job, and I do a really good job of putting the two of those together. But again, if we are going to communicate the value and benefit, the patient should be on board, and everybody, and the energy of that office and the feel of that office is one that people are going to want to continue to come into.
You know, one of the things that I love watching you at the FCA conventions is how now you're attracting the whole office into your classes. You know, the doctors are sitting there with their CAs and they're all nodding their heads, you know, because you're speaking the truth, you know. And one of the things that I love about the most about you, Lori, is that you're a straight shooter. You know, you don't sugarcoat it. You're a straight shooter. You tell it to me like it is, and we need a little bit more of that in chiropractic. You know, so many times we just want to feel good about ourselves and we want people to tell us what we want to hear. But you know what? It's not changing us. It's not going to allow us to grow us. You know, you do it with such beautiful intention because you really care. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things that I wanted to ask you, Lori. I've seen you truly go out of your, beyond your comfort zone or out of your way to help these offices and help advance chiropractic. And what do you see that through chiropractic we can help support humanity? Because I've seen how you turn around some of these practices and you know, some of our people that we both know, some of your clients that are some of the most successful chiropractors in the United States, and they tell me, they say, you know, when we hired Lori, you know, she was able to bring to us this vision of what this is, why they need today, especially when society and humanity is struggling so much with their healthcare problems. Why did you pick chiropractic to help us? Because, you know, you came from the medical environment and you've had a tremendous track record there, but why did you choose to help the chiropractors of today be able to serve humanity at a greater level?
Well, first of all, thank you for appreciating my directness. And I do it from a place of passion. And I do care. I think your profession has a great deal to offer. I love functional medicine. I love all of the extensions of it. And I feel that there was a need to really help these doctors learn the business model of it, because there's so much benefit, so much, you know, to helping and saving lives. And I did eye care. I still do eye care. I've done a lot in the medical. But for some reason, I think it was my purpose. I've been drawn to it. And I take great pride in building these practices to the level that I've built them to. But you have to be willing, thank you again, to listen to a straight shooter that says, you know, this is what needs to be done. You have the service. You have what people want and people need. We just have to figure out how to attract the right people and then run the business. So it's where I love being. You know as well as I do, I'm getting pulled more and more into it. Something I'm very excited about. I'm actually going to start to now do some teaching and some speaking at some of the colleges. I agree that the young doctor coming out of school really needs help more today more than ever because of the change in the business environment. So I'm here. I'm not going anywhere for quite some time. If you look at my calendar between now and the end of the year, I'm probably speaking at almost every chiropractic thing that's going on out there, and I love doing it. And the more I can help, the better it is.
Well, thank you, Lori. And listen, if you're listening, I hope you're inspired, because you got to right now register for the next FCA convention coming up, because you're going to get to meet Lori. You're going to get to see it and be inspired. You're going to get also to bring your staff. Remember, don't leave your staff at home. Many times, you know, we go to the seminars and the conventions to get our license renewal and not investing in our people. And let me tell you, when I'm talking about our people, we're talking about ourselves too. You need to also, just because we don't get CE sometimes in some of these classes that are more managing of the business, I want you to understand they're just as important, if not sometimes more important, because you already have a lot of clinical skills. You already have been prepared to better serve that patient clinically. But who's preparing you to run that business? Who's preparing you to train your staff properly? Who's preparing you to hire the proper staff, or being able to identify if you have the right staff currently? So listen, register right now for the FCA upcoming convention. Make sure that you sign up for Lori's class. You got to sit in her class. You got to bring your staff. I promise you, you're going to thank me for that. And Lori, thank you again. I love seeing you. You're amazing. Thanks for supporting our profession. And for those of you, I will see you at the next FCA convention.
Thank you.